Well, what a fantastic introduction to day one of the science. Excellent overview. And now we're going to hear another equally amazing set of stories from Dr. Al Bielek, who is going to talk to us about his experiences with the Philadelphia and the Phoenix experiments. Dr. Al Bielek was born in 1916 as Edward Cameron, son of Alexander Cameron, Sr. He was raised in Long Island. He attended Princeton University and later Harvard University, where he earned a PhD degree in physics in 1939. This is an incredible story. A few months later, he and his brother Duncan joined the U.S. Navy, were quickly made officers, and were assigned to the ongoing project called Project Invincibility at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. After the disastrous test, which we're going to hear about, of August 12, 1943, he remained in the Army until July 1947, when he was removed, brainwashed of all of his memory, and then given a new identity, Al Bielek, and a new family. He completed engineering school in 1958, got a BSEE degree, engaged in a career as a consultant engineer until 1988, when he retired. Dr. Bielek is now researching the secret government projects, especially in regards to the Philadelphia experiment and the Project Phoenix, which we're going to hear about today. He's lectured all over the country, and today the title of his talk specifically is From Philadelphia to Phoenix, the Psychotronic Connection. I'd like to welcome Dr. Al Bielek. Let's hear a round of applause. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me all right? Good. The subject today is a little bit different than what I have normally done. Last year, I gave you a fairly detailed history of the Philadelphia experiment and how it tied into the Phoenix project. Today, my intent is somewhat different. I wish to show the background connections between the two projects, how they happened, the politics that was involved, and the interlocking controls, if you will, and the communication which resulted in the two tests locking to each other. How this really occurred and why, and what other problems were developed because of this. It's a rather involved story, but I only have 45 minutes, so I will again try to keep this rather brief. As you know, the Philadelphia experiment culminated in two tests for the Eldridge, or if you don't know it, I'll state it now. The original 22 July 1943 test for the Eldridge, which was bad enough in terms of the personnel problem, but did not lock up to the Phoenix project. And the final test, 12 August 1943, in which the ship went into hyperspace, and it was a total disaster when it came back. And the nature of that disaster actually was far greater than anyone realizes, and the potential was unbelievably bad. I wish to go into that and what happened and how it was averted. The Phoenix project actually has been covered very well by Preston Nichols, and he will be going into some of that today and some resurrection of the technology and how it worked. So I will not go into that at all. Really to understand what happened in terms of the politics and what led up to it, we have to go back to the beginning. The project started, as I have previously stated, University of Chicago in 1931 with Dr. John Hutchinson, Nikola Tesla, and a staff physicist, Dr. Emil Kirtenauer. The important point here in the history we have to follow is what happened in terms of Tesla. In 1934, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected president of the United States. 33 is elected, and he became actual president in March of 34. In those days, it was March 20th. They've changed the date to 20 January since. And when he was in office, he invited his old friend Nikola Tesla down to Washington as they have known each other since 1917, exchanging amenities, and President Roosevelt asking Tesla, well, what have you been up to? What have you been doing? And of course, the President already knew about the ongoing work on Project Invisibility, but there were other things Tesla had been into which were exchanged. And among other things, Tesla mentioned the fact that he had been in communication with extraterrestrials. Now, this very much intrigued the President, who, unknown to the general public, was very much interested in metaphysics and rather abstruse matters. He was very curious about this, and Tesla told him a little bit about it. The equipment had been developed for such communication by RCA, which Tesla had been a member and staff member since 1919. In 1935, he became Vice President and Director of Engineering and Research worldwide, a post he held until 1939, when he retired from RCA. In that period of time, he developed some super-sensitive receivers, basically designed for RCA's use in overseas communication, and also a few transmitters here and there, all of which came in usefully to Tesla in his ongoing quest for knowledge. So he told FDR he had been in communication with several groups. Roosevelt was curious, can I talk with them? And Tesla said, definitely, well, I can arrange it if you wish, and he did. After which Roosevelt decided he would like to meet some of these people. And they asked Tesla, is this possible? And he says, I believe it is. He said, there's two groups principally you might be interested in talking with. He says, if you have in mind making any kind of a deal, because at that time, as everyone knows, we were in the midst of a terrible depression, and Roosevelt was looking for some means to get out of it, to end it. In those days, he was perhaps a little bit more altruistic than might have been the case later. So arrangements were made to meet two groups. First, the Pleiadians, and then later, a K group, as I call them, the Kondrashkin. He met first with the Pleiadians. They gave a pitch as to what they might be able to do to help. He says, fine, but I want to talk with the other group first before I make a decision. So we talked with the second group and decided in favor of the second group. And the Pleiadians at that point bowed out. And as a matter of fact, went over to Nazi Germany and made a deal with Hitler, which we'll not get into because that's another long story, but it does figure in the background precedent to World War II and the development of German technology. So Roosevelt accepted their offer of help, in which they said they would provide some new industries and other things. 1938, an offer was made to set up the entire new industry called atomic energy, which of course we have today. President Roosevelt was very interested and very receptive to the idea. And he consulted with his various advisors and the military says, whoa. If you let aliens set up an industry like this, even though it's on our home turf, and they are in essence controlling it and know where it can go, what happens? We do not have true control over it. What's going to happen in the future? Will we become vassals or slaves to them? The military advised against it, and Roosevelt turned his mind against it and so advised them, and they became upset and says, well, there's nothing else we can do for you, and disappeared into the woodwork. Well, in those days, of course, we did have intelligence apparatus, but it was not anywhere as near as efficient as today, and they did not have all of the niceties of spying, which we have now. So by 1940, Roosevelt was becoming very concerned. Where have these characters gone? What are they doing? They quite literally vanished as far as we could determine, or I should say the president and the staff could determine. He says, what are we going to do about this? Well, somebody came up with a bright idea. Mr. President, why don't we go out and find some of those psychics that are running around here and see if we can find some really good ones, and maybe they can tell us where they are and what they're doing. The president said, fine. Harry Bennett, who was then the president's right-hand advisor, was appointed the task